Okay. All right. So order of operations, we would do it in this order: parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So if I had 5 plus parentheses 3 times 2, I would do this parentheses first. So I would do 5 plus solve this, 6. And then on the next line, I would solve this part because parentheses are first. Exponent. So an exponent is a number that has a base, and the exponent is this little part right here. So if you had a 5 as your base and an exponent of 2, that actually means 5 times 5. It does not mean 5 times 2. This exponent tells you how many times you multiply the base by itself. So if you had 4 to the third power, or it's also called 4 cubed, you would do 4 times 4 times 4. It's not 4 times 3. So 4 times 4 is 16, and then you would do 16 times 4 is 24. 4, 5, 6, it would be 64. 6 squared, so when it's a 2, it's called squared, and that means 6 times 6, so it's just 36. So when you're doing order of operations, exponents and parentheses are the things that you deal with first. So parentheses first, then exponents, then multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. We'll go more into it. You're going to be doing a lot of work in order of operations, but it comes a little bit later. So that's just to kind of introduce you to the idea. All right, fractions. So we have 1/5. This is the numerator on top, and this is the denominator. Some of our fractions might have something next to it like this. This is called a mixed number. So when it has a whole number and a fraction, it is called a mixed number. So the fraction by itself, 1/5, means you have a total number of 5 pieces in one whole. So here's a whole candy bar or whatever, and it's cut into 5 pieces, and the numerator tells you how many parts are shaded. So in this case, it's 1 part shaded, which is our numerator, over the total number of pieces, which is our denominator. So there's different things we can do with fractions. One of the things is to just simply add them. 1/5 plus 2/5. If the denominators are the same, you just add the numerators together. So 1 plus 2 is 3. And then you do not add the denominators together. It would just be 3/5. Same with same with subtraction. You would just subtract the numerators. 2 minus 1 is 1, and you do not do anything to the denominator. It stays fifths. So that's pretty easy, except for it doesn't stay that easy. So we might have something that is like this. And we cannot add a third with a half, with a denominator 3 and a denominator. It's not just fifths. So what we have to do is we write the two numbers out. So this is this denominator right here, and then this is this denominator. And now we count up by threes until we get to a number that 3 and 2, when counting up, share in common. And so you'll see it is sixths. So you're going to change this denominator to a 6, and you're going to change this denominator to a 6. And in math, we cannot just change a 3 to a 6. So what would I have to do? I'd have to multiply it by 2, and then anything I do to my denominator, I do to my numerator. 2 times 1 is 2. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. 2 times something equals 6. 2 times 3, 1 times 3, 3 times 1 is 3. Now that we have the same denominator, we go ahead and write our denominator, and now we add our numerators. 2 plus 3 is 5. if we did 1/2 minus 4/5, well, actually, let's make it 2/5. So we would do the same exact process. We would count up by 2s and by 5s until we got to a common number. So our common number is 10. So I change this to a 10 and I change this to a 10. And in math, I can't just change my 2 to a 10. So I have to find out, what would I multiply 2 by to make it into a 5? I would multiply it by 5. And then anything I do to my denominator, I do to my numerator. 1 times 5 is 5. And then I can't just change my 5 to a 10, so I multiply it by 2. Anything I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 2 times 2 is 4. My denominator stays at 10, and then I add my numerators or subtract my numerators, and this is a subtraction. So in this one, I would subtract. 5 minus 4 is 1. So my answer would be 1/10. Now sometimes there is a mixed number involved in this as well. So suppose my original problem was 2 1/3 and 1 1/2. I would do all these same steps, and then for my last step, I would add these whole numbers. 2 plus 1 is 3. So my answer would be 3 5/6. And then same thing with this. If this was a 3 and this was a 1, my last step would be to do 3 minus 1 is 2. Okay, multiplying fractions. So multiplying fractions is way easier. All you do is, no matter what the denominator is, you can multiply them together. You don't have to do anything to make them the same. So we're just going to multiply step 1. Multiply numerators together. 2 times 2 is 4. Step 2, you multiply denominators together. And again, they do not have to be the same. So it's 4/9. So if you had 1/4 times 2/5, you would just multiply the numerators together. 1 times 2 is 2, and then 4 times 5 is 20. So sometimes we have to simplify fractions. Hopefully you remember that. So if you have 2 over 20 as your answer, we have to say, every time we come up with an answer, is this as low as the fraction can go? And I know that it's not, because I know that 2 and 20 share a common number that they could be divided by, and that is 2. So I would divide the numerator by 2, and I would divide the denominator by 2, and then 2 divided by 2 is 1. 20 divided by 2 is 10. I'll do another one of those. If you had 5/25, what number do you know that goes into 5 and 25? 5, right? So you can divide 5 by 5, and you can divide 25 by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 25 divided by 5 is 5. The last thing we are going to do with fractions is dividing. So if you had 2/3 divided by 1/4, the process for dividing fractions is to rewrite the first fraction. So you're just going to write it out. You're going to change the division to a multiplication, and you're going to flip the second fraction. So the 4 becomes the numerator and the 1 becomes the denominator. And then you just multiply across. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 1 is 3. Now, you might have a mixed number, and so the first step would be first changing it to an improper fraction and then following this process. So to change a improper fraction to a mixed number, the improper means that the numerator is bigger than the denominator. And that can't happen. It can happen, but we then would change it to a mixed number. So the way you change it to a mixed number is the denominator and the numerator right here. So for this one, you're going to do 3 divided by 8. How many times does 3 go into 8? 2. 2 times 3 is 6. What's left over? 2. The numerator goes, the remainder is the numerator, and then we keep the denominator the same.